Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to you all, depending on where in the world you're joining us from today. I'm Rachel Sandison, and as Deputy Vice-Chancellor for External Engagement at the University of Glasgow, it gives me enormous pleasure to welcome you all to the opening session of our Future of Internationalisation partner event. This event has been organised to celebrate the launch of our new international strategy, Global Glasgow 2025, and reflective of the changing global landscape in which we operate and anchored in our institutional values, Global Glasgow 2025 is based around 4 priority pillars: global relationships, global research, global recruitment, and global reputation, our 4 Rs. The new strategy is ambitious and it focuses on the importance of international collaboration to help address the global challenges and opportunities of our time. And we know that as an institution, we succeed when our partners succeed. And it is in this spirit of teamwork and collective action that we hope to put into practice over the next few days by bringing together 18 of our partners and sector bodies from around the world for 6 thought-provoking sessions, which will touch upon each of our 4 Rs and will also shine a spotlight on what we can accomplish when we work together. So I am therefore delighted to be able to chair our opening session, which focuses on how we can tackle global challenges and build sustainable futures, and what role universities can play to build sustainable and impactful global partnerships. So today I am joined by our highly esteemed panelists, of course our own Principal and Vice-Chancellor, Professor Sir Anton Muscatelli, Professor Jenny Dixon, who is Provost of Universitas 21, a global network of 20 world-leading and research-intensive universities. Dr. Joanna Newman, who is Secretary General of the Association of Commonwealth Universities. Professor Antoine Cazé, who is Vice-President International of the newly christened Université Paris Cité. Dr. Mychailo Wynnyckyj, who is Associate Professor of the Department of Sociology and Director of the Doctoral School at Kyiv-Mohyla Business School at the National University of Kyiv-Mohyla Academy. So thank you all for being here today and for contributing to today's event. And thank you to all of you watching, our audience, who have joined us for this session. We absolutely welcome your input today. So if anyone does have any questions for our panelists, please feel free to submit them using the Q&A function, which you should hopefully all be able to access from the control panel at the bottom of the screen. If anyone does want to share any kind of nuggets, any updates from today's event on their social media platforms, then please do use the hashtag #GlobalGlasgow25. Now, without any further ado, it is my great pleasure to hand over to Anton, who will officially open the conference with his keynote address. Anton, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Rachel, for that very kind introduction. And thanks to you and colleagues for taking the time to organize this important event today and for everyone for joining us. I'm really looking forward to the launch of our new Global Glasgow strategy. And as an institution, of course, we've always been global. It's not a new thing. And you mentioned some of our panelists today, and for Professor Antoine Cazé joining us from Paris, our first known student from France is Jacques Mazeri, who's actually graduated in arts in Glasgow in 1585. And for our panelists, Dr. Mychailo Wynnyckyj from the National University of Kyiv-Mohyla Academy, you might be interested to know that Glasgow's first known Ukrainian student graduated from our university with a Doctor of Laws in 1767. And really in the 255 years since that date, we've seen our institution grow its international partnerships. We now host students and colleagues from over 140 countries. We have around 420 study abroad partnerships across the world. We have a global alumni community of more than 219,000 people. We deliver a range of qualification and partnership with 3 international universities, 2 in China and 1 in Singapore, and with many more strategic partnerships with universities across the globe. And I know many of our partners, of course, Rachel, are joining us for today's event, so I'm really delighted to welcome you all, albeit virtually. And part of our commitment to being a responsible international university that builds meaningful relationship is exactly in that word you used. It's about meaningful relationships. It's about the work that we do to evaluate how we build relationships today with our partners, supporting capacity building. So it's not just about peer-to-peer relationships, but it's also about capacity building and conducting our business as a truly civic university, existing for the benefits of those that we serve, both here at home in our city of Glasgow, but across the globe. And universities, by their very nature, are facilitators of social, environmental, and economic development. We are anchor institutions. We are rooted locally in communities, but also with extensive global reach through our diverse international student population, through our partnerships and collaborations. And as we've seen with the COVID-19 pandemic, and as we discussed here in our city of Glasgow 6 months ago with the UN's conference COP26 on climate change, global challenges necessitate global solutions. And only by working together and working across borders will we ensure a green, an equitable and sustainable future for ourselves and for generations to come. Now, in 2015, of course, we saw the inception of the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, by the United Nations General Assembly, and a UN resolution calling for Agenda 2030, the year by which these SDGs must be met. Now, many universities now use these Sustainable Development Goals as a framework to become more sustainable, to contribute globally to a more sustainable future for all, whether through research and investing in communities, or through education, through student mobility, through knowledge exchange. And of course, the attention of those who write about higher education is also turning to these goals. Times Higher Education releases annual impact rankings to assess universities' progress against their pledges to implement the UN's SDGs. THE's ranking system allows participating institutions to benchmark themselves against others, regardless of their geography and standing on any metric within the SDGs. And it allows universities to see where they need to step up in relation to their peers. We were delighted that when Glasgow took part in these rankings this year for the first time in our debut year, we ranked 19th overall in the world for the positive impact that we have on society. Now, the University of Glasgow ranked first in Scotland and third in the UK. And further to this, we were placed second globally for Sustainable Cities and Communities, SDG 11, which is concerned with making cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, and sustainable. And this was fantastic for us, since we do see ourselves as a world-leading research-intensive university committed to contributing towards the SDGs for the benefit of us all. And to demonstrate our commitment, we signed the UN SDG Accord in 2017, and we are using the UN SDGs to shape the development of our breadth of research and activities here at the university. And this is also because many of the goals encompass our own aspirations related to sustainability, to climate justice, to tackling inequalities. And the goals allow a framework to create and build partnerships with our sister institutions with similar ambitions. So if I may, I'll mention just a couple of examples specific to Glasgow. And from this, it will be clear that particular SDGs start to emerge as areas of particular impact and value for our university, and where we see ourselves making the most positive impact through our partnerships for our local community, but also internationally. Firstly, as an educational institution, of course, SDG 4, to provide quality education, is crucial for us. And the University of Glasgow here in Scotland and in the UK has been leading the widening access agenda for young people for decades, but we've also made a commitment to widen access to learners across the globe through dedicated scholarships, and specifically through the significant commitment to sanctuary scholarships, open to all students seeking refuge, if they're refugees and they're seeking sanctuary with us. Secondly, on SDG 3, which relates to ensuring healthy lives and promoting well-being for all at all ages, Glasgow is a world leader on health and medical research, particularly in understanding the mechanisms of chronic disease and global infection. Our academics are undertaking a number of initiatives, such as influencing national and international child oral health through the Child Smile program to reduce tooth decay and improve dental health in children. And in fact, the World Health Organization included this initiative in its international health workforce education and training programs. And our university has been conducting workshops for oral health counterparts in Australia, in Thailand, in Chile, in Brazil, in Nigeria, and Malawi. And this project also cuts across SDG 10 to reduce inequality in and amongst countries. And thirdly, on SDG 13, climate action, post-COP26, the university is leading a number of very interesting and exciting initiatives. Most recently, the Gallant project, which will see the city of Glasgow act as a test bed for sustainable solutions to tackle some of the most pressing challenges we face in the race to net zero. We're working with multiple partners across the world, including C40 cities and the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, to deliver this £10 million programme funded by UKRI. And fourthly, for SDG 11, which supports sustainable cities and communities, the university is home to the Centre for Sustainable and Healthy Living Cities and Neighbourhoods, an international consortium of 9 research partners aiming to strengthen capacity to address urban health and education challenges in neighbourhoods across fast-growing cities in Africa and Asia. And finally, on SDG 17, which encourages partnerships to achieve the goals, this is, of course, the crux of today's discussion that we're going to have. It's the bedrock of our global Glasgow strategy, which you mentioned, Rachel, which is explained to us. And we're building partnerships based on mutual trust and respect is fundamental. So aside from our role in achieving the SDGs, I really want to turn now to the wider civic role of universities and their responsibility for providing a comprehensive and high quality education for world's learners, and indeed how we use our partnerships to do so. As universities, we are responsible for teaching our students to have a global outlook, to develop the rigorous scientific mindset and the spirit of curiosity and entrepreneurship needed to drive sustainable development. Higher education also facilitates social mobility. It contributes in various ways to making people more resilient. It empowers critical thinking. It offers opportunities to co-create knowledge with private and public sector bodies across the world. And perhaps most importantly, universities support our students to be responsible global citizens. And now more than ever, we have a duty to enrich our campuses with students and colleagues from around the world. The health of our universities and our democracies relies on the sharing of different thoughts, ideas and perspectives, and we must nourish this wherever possible. It's the combination of these core missions, I think, that gives universities a unique place in the common effort to achieve sustainable and impactful development. And now to conclude, before I hand back to you, Rachel, and to the panel for their thoughts, I just want to offer some reflections on the future and perhaps the path ahead for universities in achieving sustainable and global partnerships. As I've outlined, universities are engines of change and they're engines of growth. They always have been. But now I think we really must accelerate the impact of our groundbreaking research, our high quality education, and our cutting edge innovation. We must be generous with our knowledge and our experiences, working towards our shared ambitions together. So for example, in Glasgow, we're working with our partner organizations, Universitas 21, the Guild of European Research Intensive Universities, CIVIS, and with the African Research University Alliances to expand our network, to share knowledge, best practice, and working collectively on the key issues facing us. Strong universities are an important part of civil society, partnering with government, industry, and the third sector to work towards common goals. And through their contributions to specific SDGs, universities facilitate the achievement of all the other goals and are the backbone of the 3 pillars of sustainable development: economic, environmental, and social. So I really hope that in the months and years ahead, Glasgow will continue to set a precedent in this regard, working with our international partners to produce innovative solutions whilst educating our students to be responsible global citizens. But we've got lots to learn, and so I sincerely look forward to hearing what our panelists have to say on this topic. So once again, thanks to all of my colleagues who organized today's session. Thank you to our panelists, and thank you to all of you for your engagement today. Over to you, Rachel.
Thank you so much, Anton, for that opening keynote and for the really insightful comments that you have around the future of internationalisation. So those watching will have gotten a really rich sense of what this means for the University of Glasgow. I'm now really keen to turn to each of our panellists to hear more about what the future of internationalisation means and looks like, either for their institution or for their organisation, or in fact for the sector as a whole. So Jenny, if I may, I will come to you first, if that's okay.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm truly delighted to be here today, and I'd like to just acknowledge yourself and Anton for delivering such a timely event on a very critical topic. We come to this subject today, I think, at an extraordinary time with massive upheaval. The pandemic, climate change, refugee crises, and seismic geopolitical shifts. Woven into the fabric of this upheaval are growing inequality, increased poverty, and political polarization. This radically evolving global landscape was the focus for senior U21 leaders when they recently gathered in person for the first time in 3 years. And at the heart of our network, we share a common belief in the value of collaboration and internationalization, and which Anton has outlined so eloquently in his speech. That belief is unwavering, and I think post-COVID, the drive for internationalization is alive and well. But we are witnessing a fracturing and realignment of the global economic and political system. War in Europe is exacerbating the retreat from globalization to regionalism. But U21 and other networks are a buttress against the shift away from globalization. Strong international organizations must keep the flame of globalization alive. And as we know, global understanding is fostered by strong cornerstone institutions like universities and networks like U21 and others here today. We have a critical role in soft diplomacy, and I think it's even more important now. But the higher education sector is, of course, uniquely placed in helping to build a sustainable, equitable, collaborative, and connected future. When we met 3 weeks ago in Birmingham, our senior leaders were acutely aware that we are in a period of rapid transition and it's not clear what the future looks like. But we need to prepare for it and we must act. And the SDGs are a really good vehicle for helping us do that. I think a fundamental role is to model a new 2022 version of internationalization that is cognizant of the myriad of issues facing universities, and Anton outlined some of those, along with tackling some of the really big global issues facing society, and universities are really well placed to do that. This means that we'll need to have a stronger external focus as we look to strengthen our international connectedness. SDG 17 calls for accelerating and scaling up effective partnerships in support of the SDGs, and this is what we are doing in U21. Our members are extremely active in this space now. There's a reconfiguration of partnerships underway with a stronger strategic focus. And what is interesting is that they are rethinking with whom and how they partner, and they are reassessing their values in this context. They want to ensure equality is built into the foundation of their international partnerships. For U21, we're seeking out new members from regions underrepresented in the network, and we'll pursue relationships with other networks and initiatives. I think this is a really important moment to recognize the power of networks working together more intentionally. Looking ahead, we'll continue to be global in our outlook with a sustainability conscious lens. Mindful of our carbon footprint, staff will travel purposefully, but we'll continue to travel. And we'll continue to deliver our programs online with a hybrid approach for other activities. Interestingly, we are already seeing some shifts as people want to reconnect and meet together in person more frequently. We've obviously undervalued the importance of our face-to-face meetings in the past. But for U21, internationalization is what we do, and that hasn't changed. What has changed is our global environment. We didn't plan it this way, but our founders 25 years ago felt a global duty to forge strong international connections. Right now, while the outlook remains uncertain, our members left our Birmingham meeting with an unwavering commitment to internationalization, collaboration, working across borders, and the real positive impact that we can have on lives across the globe. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Jenny. And the University of Glasgow is a very proud founding member of Universitas 21, which is a network that continues to go from strength to strength. So thank you for your leadership and for your comments this morning. I will now turn, I think, to Europe, if I may. And Antoine, can I ask you to come in and give your reflections? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Rachel. It's a pleasure to be here. And I would like to start by thanking the University of Glasgow, obviously, for the invitation. It's really an honor to be with you in this panel and to have the occasion to discuss and share our views on internationalization and global partnerships. I was in Glasgow a month ago, as you remember, Rachel. We had a wonderful day together, and my colleagues from Aix-Marseille were also there. So France was well represented with the embassy. And I must say it's a privilege to be a partner of the University of Glasgow through the Guild, and more to come, I assure you. We are working on that very hard at the moment. So the University of Glasgow has been an inspiration for us. The way your university develops integrated projects for your entire community and beyond, particularly the global strategy that you've put together, is quite remarkable. And I'm saying this because, as you mentioned in the introductions, Université Paris Cité is a very young institution. It was born only 2 years ago from the merger of two previous universities, certainly, but the change and the shifts are massive, and it places us in a very specific position. We are still trying to find our bearings and create a sense of identity. So turning to a university like Glasgow and being partners with you is extremely important for us to move forward. So the massive institutional transformation that we are undergoing at the moment makes it an obligation for us to transform in a responsible and sustainable way. That's a tremendous opportunity which must provide a compass for our international development. I'm going to repeat a number of things that have already been said, but I think we all share, it's good to see that we share the same ideas and values around these issues. So in an era of globalization, it seems to me that being an active part of networks of like-minded partners must be a priority. Only then can our research, our teaching, our service to society be impactful in tackling global challenges and build sustainable futures. We're all aware that the nature of institutional collaboration between universities on an international scale has changed. I think this has been said in various ways by Anton and by by Jenny just now. To be sure, research is still the driving force of such collaboration between universities, an absolute requisite in order to sustain the international and collaborative nature of science in times when this nature, collaborative nature, is being massively and aggressively criticized on all levels of society, from the people to the some top governments. So we need to reassert the importance of this. But simultaneously, there's also a need today to create university ecosystems built on shared values, which must be translated into shared practices. In other words, we believe that global partnerships have to be transformative for the partners. By this, I mean that we need to be challenged by being open to collaborations that will help us to tackle global challenges from a diversity of perspectives. If we don't do that, our global will only be a projection of a Western world ethos or a Northern Hemisphere ethos, depending on your geopolitical setup, geopolitical thinking. For this reason, I want to emphasize the fact that the way in which the Guild has done a stellar job through its members, of course, to build strong connections with African universities, leading to a renewed understanding of what collaborations with them should be in terms of research topics, educational and institutional mechanisms. This work, collective work of the network, the Guild, of which we are both members, Paris Cité and Glasgow, reinforces my conviction that global networks in higher education and research are necessary to tackle global challenges. Similarly, I think we all have hopes that the European University Alliances will go in this direction as they develop their global approach and define how they can make an impact by co-constructing solutions to build sustainable futures. And just to give a concrete example, Paris Cité is a member of Circle U, the Circle U Alliance, and we've been thinking for over a year now about our global reach and global development. And the approach that we have taken, I'm sure it's common in many alliances, is not to select the best partners according to rankings and all that. There is that, obviously, we cannot deny that. But at the same time, the gist of the idea is to find networks of institutions that are maybe smaller or lesser known, but which have really an impact on the ground, and see how we can partner with them efficiently and imaginatively, and we hope intelligently. I just want to come back a little bit on the values. In an era of accelerating crises and massive surges of distrust, partnerships should first and foremost define shared values and mutually reinforce these by promoting them locally and globally. So I was recently in King's College last week, actually, and the Vice Principal for Internationalization at the University of Toronto was there, and he was mentioning what they're doing with 9 African universities at the moment, the partnership that they're signing. And he really told us that it took over a year to develop this common sense, understanding, and sharing of values. And it needs that long time, but it's essential. If we don't take that step first, we are going to be in trouble. So these values must be thought in terms of impact for sustainability. They must be implemented in the way in which we deliver our teaching programs and carry out our research. And these values should first and foremost be in the service of society, particularly, I think, to help people think through complexity with a critical mind. This has been said by Anton too. In terms of sustainability, which is the topic of this panel, we are obliged by our students, the generations of the future, to be responsible for helping make our world, quite simply, a livable one. That's the primary and strongest reason why universities should contribute to the building of sustainable futures. Therefore, I would say a global strategy should include a politics of the earth and vice versa. I use that phrase, politics of the earth, by reference to one of the 9 interdisciplinary centers we have at Université Paris Cité called the Center for the Politics of the Earth, Centre des Politiques de la Terre. In their position paper, they underline the importance of interdisciplinarity, true interdisciplinarity, that is, the social sciences talking with the hard sciences, let's face it, not the milder form of interdisciplinarity. So they underline this in order to truly think comprehensively if we want to tackle global challenges in any sustainable way. They propose 4 domains of action for research, which are the data revolution, the question of representations, knowledge for public action in the face of environmental emergency, and finally, the need to reconceptualize health for the Anthropocene. So these are the 4 domains in which they want to create the necessary, the backbone of a politics of the earth. And this should sustain any global relationships and any global partnerships. I want to end with 2 concrete examples, the first local and the second international, and the 2 being connected. So last year, Université Paris Cité launched a course called Ecological Transition and Societal Challenges. This course was open to all students, is open to all students across the disciplines. And around 100 students took that course from 10 different tracks, or 10 different areas of study. And now, in 2 weeks' time, these same students collectively will present their views on the green transition to the entire university in an event called We Look Up, with a fine reference to the movie that you probably have seen on Netflix. Oops, I shouldn't have said that. No publicity for any private institution. So anyway, so they're presenting their collective views on the green transition to the entire university in this event, a day of workshops to raise the awareness of the entire community. So I think here we have a good example of collective empowerment through knowledge, which is then redistributed to the entire community through such an event. And that is a key to change. My second example is what we've done in Circle U, our European University Alliance, which I mentioned earlier. And this is the driving engine of our European Alliance is the creation of knowledge hubs. We've called them knowledge hubs. We have 3 based on the Sustainable Development Goals. So that's also why I mentioned them. One is on climate change, the second on global health, and the third on democracy. It's not entirely original, of course, but it's not the point. The point is the concept of the hub. I think this is a very important concept. Through these hubs, we create seminars, summer schools, public events, collaboration between academics at a high level, and we now have almost 40 chairs of Circle U working together on these topics. I think the hub is a good symbol of what a global partnership could be and should be. It's a place of interconnection and exchange. And it's another key to set up the conditions for active change. Interconnection meaning networks, which I've mentioned heavily, and exchange meaning redistribution, which I mentioned previous example. I think these two together, creating hubs of international partners, this is the transformational potential for global partnerships. On this note, thank you very much. And I hand over to you, Rachel.
Merci beaucoup, Antoine. Thank you so much for that. And I would be really interested in taking your Politics of the Earth course. I love that. So hopefully we'll have time to discuss some of these innovations in more detail.
Of course, I will share links. I can send links to, so you can see on the internet the report I was mentioning or the position paper I was mentioning.
Please do. That would be wonderful. That would be wonderful. Thank you so much. So moving from Europe, moving back into the importance of global connectivity within that network environment. Joanna, if I can come to you, that would be wonderful.
Thank you very much, Rachel, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here. I want to acknowledge actually also the membership of many of the universities in Universitas 21, including Auckland and including Glasgow, and we're very, very proud to work with you as our members. I wanted to start, and I suppose I've been reflecting as I've been listening to the contributions so far, how our network differs. It has the same challenges and the same goals, I think, but it differs in that we have over 500 members, of which 66% are in low or middle income countries. So we have a huge disparity in our members between those that are in areas where there is very little access to higher education and those powerhouses like Glasgow or King's that was mentioned, or others that have huge capacity in developed countries. And I wanted to think about the contribution that higher education makes, because to some extent we're talking to an audience of the converted in this seminar, where we understand the importance of higher education and partnerships. But if we go back to pre-2015 in the Millennium Development Goals, higher education, access for higher education for quality lifelong learning was not included. So it was a huge achievement by many universities and networks to actually have SDG 4 in the Sustainable Development Goals and to have it mentioned for the first time. And networks like the ACU, in our partnership with the Association International Universities and the Association Universities Francophonie, so between us over 2,000 members, have been making the case very powerfully, I think, to UNESCO, the United Nations, Commonwealth governments, global governments, that higher education is key to a prosperous, peaceful future for all. And that is a message which actually, I think, still in other circles has not filtered through. We argue that higher education is important to all 17 Sustainable Development Goals. In fact, there wouldn't be a single one of the goals that could be achieved without the role of higher education. Everything is interconnected, as we've already heard, but you won't have good pedagogy. There aren't good teachers training. There isn't the applied research, let alone the blue skies research, the curious-minded graduates who become global citizens, without the contribution that the tertiary sector, including further education and skills, makes. And so the emphasis on education for all to the age of 12 is obviously very valuable and important, but that link between the education for all and leaving no one behind to access to higher education for us is also equally crucial and important. Otherwise, you are wasting talent of generations and you are not solving global problems. We've had some success recently, our networks working together. We've just come back from Nairobi, where the Commonwealth Education Ministers Conference created a communique, which will go to the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Rwanda shortly. And it, for the first time, concludes that countries should finance higher education systems and that they should be strengthened. And this is quite an achievement in the sense that up until now, higher education has not been in the room when talking about development and education. I've also just come back from Barcelona, where there was the UNESCO World Higher Education Conference, the third one in its history. And again, all of these issues were being debated from the point of view of institutions, networks like ours, regional and national networks as well. But one of the things which I think the ACU wants to tackle mainly is what, at the beginning of the Kenya conference in Nairobi on education, President Kenyatta opened the conference, and he made a kind of clarion call about the inequality of access that exists, and that by 2030, Japan and Korea will have something like 80 or 90% gross tertiary enrollment, whereas countries across sub-Saharan Africa vary between 5 to 8% of access. So that is, we still live in a world where access to education is still based on geography and wealth. And although there are modalities, and we're all involved in various different ways in trying to address this, I think that the main areas that the ACU is concerned about is equity, access and mobility. And through these different modalities, one can start to think about how one can change the system. And indeed at UNESCO, many university leaders were talking about systemic change needed. It's all very well to talk about collaborative partnerships, but we need bravery and looking at how we can actually change the system to enable more people to join, but also to address the inequities in the system. And I applaud Glasgow for its historic partnership with the University of the West Indies, which was signed in 2019, and commits to a research and collaboration education partnership over many years with committed funding and a sustainable approach. And I think that that's a fantastic example of how universities can take a leadership role in addressing and naming some of the inequalities that exist. As a Commonwealth network, which is based on the modern Commonwealth, but comes from a colonial past, the ACU takes decolonisation across the whole academy really seriously. And we have, for example, a network within our organisations, Peace and Reconciliation Network. It has 155 members in 65 universities. It's currently led by the University of Melbourne and Stellenbosch University. We have a Commonwealth Climate and Resilience Network, again, addressing issues about access and resilience, as well as climate, not in the research space, with 237 members in 62 universities. And that's led by Fiji National, the University of South Pacific, and the University of the West Indies. And we have an SDG network as well, which has also 450 members in 179 institutions. So one of the ways I think that the network like the ACU can address equity, access and challenges is to bring our members together. It's our convening power. And I think Universitas 21 probably finds the same thing. It's by bringing members together that you can find the differences and commonalities in how one challenges and creates answers to global challenges. The other area that I think that networks like ours and universities can make the case for change is through equitable partnerships. And Rachel and Anton have talked about the new strategy, which very much privileges that. So, there is a communique that the ACU signed with the African Research Universities Association, the UK Research and Innovation Network, that basically came up with 10 recommendations for funders and partners on how to create research partnerships for development and a vision for future success. And we would be very happy to make these available because they're for policymakers and for universities to base policy and partnerships on those sorts of principles. We've also just published a report with the British Council on how international higher education partnerships contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals, but also making the case about long-term sustainable partnerships, recognising that partners will always have different circumstances and that capacity building or some form of action to redress the differences in abilities to contribute will need to be part of it and sewn in. We've also just been involved in programs with our partners to address the supply and demand problem in higher education. So creating really fantastic quality modules that can be shared where lecturers can be trained to deliver that material. So there are lots of ways in which I think institutions, but also perhaps more the networks, can make the argument for institutions that we can make changes happen and that we can create a future where the future of internationalisation is based on solid principles of equity, solid principles of a recognition that if you want really good research, you will impoverish yourself if you don't involve the global south, and if you don't find mechanisms for valuing other systems of knowledge that may not have been privileged in the past. So it's very much about basing our future international collaborations on really solid principles that are not about going into somewhere and coming out again, but you're there for the long term. And it benefits research, it benefits teaching, and it benefits the future security of our world. And perhaps 7 years to go to 2030, it might even reach us a little bit closer to reaching those goals. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Joanna. And you've raised a number of really key issues that I'm sure we'll come back to again if time allows. But the importance of the role of government in supporting higher education and the internationalisation agenda, and the convening power of networks, and that was absolutely echoed in some of what Jenny said. And also, I think the focus on equity, access and mobility. And I would love to kind of touch on some of these topics in a little bit further detail. But before we do that, and we open out to our audience for questions, and I know that we've got a few coming in already, so thank you so much for that. Last but by no means least, I want to turn to Mychailo. And Mychailo, thank you so much for joining us today. Real particular challenge that your institution and the sector in Ukraine faces at this moment in time. And I just wanted to say that, as you know, our thoughts and best wishes are with you and your community, and it's a real privilege to have you join us today and to share your thoughts. So thank you very much for taking the time to do so, and I'll now hand over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Rachel, for having me. Thank you very much to Professor Muscatelli for the nod to the Ukrainian connection to Glasgow. Historically, obviously, I actually learned something today, which is very good. Thank you very much for that. 1767 is a long time ago for a doctor of law. Thank you to Jenny Dixon, actually, for talking about geopolitical upheaval in this is obviously something that we are currently experiencing. I'm going to start my contribution with obviously some huge words of thanks to the entire academic community, I would say of the world, for providing rapid relief to Ukrainian students and academics who have found themselves over the last 3 months in a variety of situations that are obviously very, very difficult. I also want to warn you that my contribution will be a little bit controversial and perhaps a little bit provocative. We'll see how that goes. But I mean, Ukrainians tend to be controversial and provocative. This is what we're all about for the last 3 months, if not for the last 3 centuries. Thank you, and thank you, and thank you again to all of your governments, to all of your communities, to all of the academic institutions that have provided rapid relief to students, but also for the military, diplomatic and economic aid that is going to a country that is at the moment experiencing aggression and invasion. And we did not ask for this war, but as we like to say, we didn't ask for it, but certainly we are going to win it. The immediate response has obviously been breathtaking, and that has been to house and to help various students and academics and also generally refugees from Ukraine. There have been several initiatives. Most prominently, we've seen what's called the Ukrainian Global University Initiative, which effectively was an initiative, or is an initiative, to try to help in an online format students that have been caught sort of in mid-semester or in mid-studies to complete their studies. These are in an online format, and obviously we have a great deal of experience now over the last 2 years because of COVID in teaching online, in terms of moving the academic experience online. But I think one of the things that we've learned over the last 2.5 years is that education cannot be completely transferred online. Education requires a face-to-face experience, because education is not just about knowledge transfer or competency building, it's also about building social and cultural capital. And these things are very difficult to do in an online format. So that's one thing that I want to address. And the other thing that I wanted to address is the fact that we in Ukraine at the moment are very concerned with a risk of brain drain. And I think that this is something that is a concern not only for us, it's a concern for the entire, well, be it Southern, Eastern Hemisphere, whichever way, Antoine, you like to refer to it. But the point is that when we're talking about either lower income or we're talking about countries that are experiencing crises, the risk of brain drain is significant. Let me just give you some statistics. Yesterday, a representative survey of refugees in Poland, Ukrainian refugees in Poland, and I'll remind you that's 2.5 million people at this point that are being housed in Poland. A representative survey has shown that 17% of them plan to stay permanently in Poland. And that's only after 3 months of war. 17% of 2.5 million is a very significant number. Obviously, that is, the survey is showing that that's a cross-reference, or a cross-section, excuse me, of Ukrainian society, including both the most educated as well as the least educated. The point is that Ukraine is going to lose population, not just to Russian guns. We believe that universities provide an anchor, not the anchor, but an anchor, which is important for fighting brain drain. And we believe this because identity is important. One of the things that Rachel mentioned in the strategy that Glasgow has adopted is one of the R's is reputation. Reputation is about building an identity, a connection, if you like, to an institution, which I think is something that is very important because it lasts throughout a lifetime. And so internationalization is obviously extremely important because it's about sharing, it's about discussion, it's about doing things that are really truly what academia was supposed to be about and has always been about. But we are also risk very often erasing difference, and institutional allegiance must be part of maintaining institutional allegiance must be part of any internationalization strategy, because mobility is good, but brain drain is problematic, and it's certainly not conducive to sustainable development throughout the world. So we believe that universities are not just a place of study or work, they define communities. And universities are very often at the center of ecosystems. So we obviously, with our university as the center of an ecosystem, which we believe is very important for Kyiv, we're trying to find innovative ways to cope with this risk of brain drain and cope with the crisis and the war that the war has caused at this point. Our answer has been to, rather than go together with the initiative of the Global University, which effectively is moving everything online, and rather than simply accepting that our students are going to be scattered and our faculty is going to be scattered throughout Europe and indeed the world, we've gone to an initiative of trying to create satellite campuses. And I'm very pleased that we are moving in that direction with Glasgow. We have several other universities that we are also moving in that direction with. The idea obviously is to build on projects that are either in a COIL format or blended learning. The point is that joint teaching is important. We're moving towards joint programs, and those really will be the foundation for the future, as well as joint research. And joint research is something that requires academic matching, because we understand that as administrators, we can set up networks and memorandum of understanding, but unless those are filled with real research links between academics, they remain on paper. And one of the things that was mentioned today, and I'm very pleased about this, was the concept of shared values, which I think is something that's very important in any kind of partnerships like this. And I think one of the things that we need to realize that its values are something that are instantiated in very different priorities. For example, in the Ukrainian career, in the academic career, teaching is paramount. In the Western academic career, it's publish or perish. So these things are actually very difficult very often to bring together, because these are different paradigms from which people come. That doesn't mean that it's impossible. It just simply means that we must be aware of the fact that these cultural differences need to be worked on. And the way that we think that it needs to be done, the model that we are proposing, is a physical presence in partner universities. In other words, it's not just a matter of bringing students over for mobility or bringing academics over for research visits, etc. Conferences are good, but a presence of that, an administrative presence that will indeed act as a coordination office, if you like, maintaining something that's very important called institutional identity. So even though a student or an academic may be mobile, maybe not at their home university, for example, at Glasgow, they would maintain a home base, if you like, that would maintain their institutional identity, because we believe that that's, and it's not the answer to brain drain, obviously, but it is a small brick in the wall or in the foundation of trying to build a sustainable type of partnership rather than fostering brain drain. Obviously, in future, as Ukrainians, we are always very optimistic. In the future, these offices or these satellite campuses, we believe, will become sort of recruitment centers and information provision centers for Glasgow and other students that would like to come to Kyiv. We believe that the war, well, it's not a matter of we believe, all wars eventually end in peace. That is perhaps a platitude, but it's a fact. And so we believe that there will be a significant interest from the academic community to research Ukraine, to come to Ukraine, to study in Ukraine, and to build international ecosystems with a Ukrainian university. We need to build the foundation for that today, but already looking forward, I invite you to this wonderful, beautiful city called Kyiv, which we today are calling the capital of freedom. Thanks for your attention.
Mychailo, thank you so much. It's incredibly humbling, but hugely powerful for us to have you join us today and to hear from a Ukrainian university's perspective as to the very particular challenges and opportunities that you face today, but actually what the world of internationalization will mean for you tomorrow. And I'm seeing there's lots of support coming in through the audience. So thank you so much for sharing. Actually, something that not provocative but thought-provoking, and I think that's really, really important. And so hopefully we'll be able to come back and touch on some of the issues that you've raised. I think particularly that one around brain drain, and we discuss that a lot when it comes to how we're engaging, particularly with our partners in the global south, and how do we stop this from happening? How do we strengthen capacity in countries without actually just stealing all of the talent in the West? And I think that is a particular problem that we have to address. So I am now delighted that we have about 20 minutes left for questions. So I'm going to bring all of the panelists back together, if I may. You're all going to start popping back up on the screen. We do have some questions that have been posed in the chat, and thank you, because I know that Antoine and Anton have been responding to some of these in real time, but maybe I'll just bring you in to say a little bit more if that's okay, and obviously allow others to add any comments that they have as well. So the first is really, and sorry, this has been sent in anonymously, so I'm not sure where this individual is from, but it's about how we embed the broader themes of equality, diversity, and inclusivity in international partnership development. And they have particularly called out a focus on the LGBTQI+ communities. So, Antoine, you had posted something into the chat, but I don't know whether you want to just make a comment on that particular issue.
Thank you very much. No, I don't think I want to add anything. My point here is that the values must not be just in name only and just, talked about, but they must be actually implemented in actions. And I'm sure that you're all familiar with the possibilities of, particularly for diversity, inclusivity, and the LGBTQ plus issue, or not issue, but sector. Universities have set in place mechanisms, centers, not only of research, but also institutional facilities to help these communities to be more recognized, integrated, valued as they should be. So, and I think that this is something that is affecting the entire society, of course. And my point here is that when we develop new partnerships on a global scale, we need to take those on board very strongly and make sure that they apply in all our partners. And there might be some cultural differences, and that's what I said in the last part of my answers. It means also, if we want to do that, we need to be ready to be challenged by differences and take them on board, discuss, exchange, see how we can mutually improve. That is my point.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Antoine. And you know, the challenges around equality, diversity, inclusion and belonging, you know, are at the top of the agenda, I think, in every university across the globe. And certainly that's very true for the University of Glasgow as well. And how do we ensure that those values then seed into the international activities and partnerships that we are developing, whilst at the same time, obviously being respectful, having respect for the fact that we are engaging in different cultures and different environments. And I think there are particular challenges around that. Joanna, you look very thoughtful, so I might bring you in if you'd like to comment.
Thank you. First of all, I just want to comment on Mychailo's fantastic contribution, and I was thinking about how one could actually apply your comments about brain drain and the way that you're responding to that with the sort of satellite campuses, etc., as a more general point about what good behaviour looks like, or what the future could look like. So the ACU manages the UK government's main scholarship schemes, which includes the Commonwealth Scholarship Commission, Marshall, which is the US, UK, and also the Chevening scholarships, which is 180 countries. And one of the conditions of all of those scholarship schemes is that the students, when they finish their award, which are usually at postdoc level, have to go back to their country. And because we've been managing these schemes since the 1950s, we have huge longitudinal data on the impact of mobility and what it does. And we've also got information about where those alumni have gone to and what they've done. So I'm not against traditional mobility programs, because I think they do actually show and demonstrate the impact on development and on change. But I also think that the modalities should change and address the fact that there is brain drain, and that actually there are different ways. So there is the distance masters, for example, that we've been doing, which actually attracts lots of students who would not normally go overseas. And so then it leads to different sorts of outcomes for them. But there's also split site PhDs. And I think that that is a really fantastic way forward, where university has to have a partnership with another university because they have to know each other. The student obviously benefits from a year overseas in, say, the UK, and then the rest of their PhD being carried out in their own university. It means that their own university is not stripped of that person and human resource for that long. But it also means that people follow on. There's a path that comes afterwards because the universities have spoken to each other. Now, this doesn't just apply to postdocs, postgraduates, it applies to postdoctorates. The ACU's network gives small grants, and part of our mobility work is to ensure that early career researchers are supported to spend up to 3 months in another member university. Or we have a 2-year master's, which is only available in low and middle income countries. So we support the idea of mobility, but we support it in a way that does not support brain drain, if you like, and that actually builds up capacity. But I also really liked your example of setting up satellite campuses. There was an example under climate and resilience, for example, where a university that was completely flooded because of hurricanes ended up having a partnership with a UK university where the whole of the medical cohort could continue their degree. But they didn't become that university's students. They retained their membership and identity of the original university. And I think, again, those are things that one can do so that during periods of great stress and difficulty, you do what you can to continue the education and maintain it, but you do it through a spirit of partnership that ensures that the university does not lose those students and that they are maintained, and that actually the relationship is therefore strengthened and can develop. And as you say, let's hope that those satellite centres start to send students back into Ukrainian universities in the next few years. So I just wanted to reflect on what I've heard. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Joanna. And actually, it's a really lovely segue into one of the questions that Anton has also responded to. And so I'll maybe just bring Anton in a moment. But thank you to Laurie Hartman, who has posted up in the chat. And first of all, you know, hugely inspiring statements from each and every one of you. But it's exactly this point around, you know, mobility being great and holding conferences in the Global South, fantastic. But what more can we be doing to make some of these partnerships and commitments more long-term and sustainable? And I'm guessing, Laurie, also tackling that particular challenge around brain drain as well. So Anton, I know that you've posted something up into the chat, but I don't know if you want to just come in and give further comment right now.
You know, thanks, Rachel, and I'm happy to do so briefly. And I think this is hugely important, as Joanna and Mychailo have pointed out. You know, if you really are going to try and create more equal partnerships there, you know, you need to look at all possible modalities of doing research, doing joint activity. What I mentioned in the chat as a reply is that we've been trying to do some of this with our long-standing partners in Malawi around the Blantyre development, which was initially thought about, you know, the whole area of infection, the whole area of chronic disease. You know, Africa suffers from similar diseases, of course, as you would expect to, you know, the people of Glasgow, but often the causes are slightly different, but many of the issues are exactly the same. And in the past, we've used traditional models of mobility where we've brought PhD students, postdocs to Glasgow, trained them, and then there's always the issue of brain drain, and that Mychailo and others have pointed out. But over time, what we've tried to do with this partnership, and you'll hear more from our partners later on, so I don't want to spoil that particular discussion, is being to think, look, what can we do in terms of this research in Africa? So we're now looking at things like clinical trials for the first time ever in sub-Saharan Africa, for the, you know, that haven't been done in the global north on issues that will not just affect Africa, but which will affect us. So it creates a real equality in the research agenda. It's not about, you know, northern science sort of going to the global south and being applied. It's a bi-directional relationship. It avoids some of the brain drain issues because people are being trained, there's capacity building within Malawi, and we're now looking at how we extend our model potential to other sub-Saharan African countries like Zambia, where we've been, as you know, we've been having some discussions. So for me, you know, it's exactly as colleagues have said, these are the models of partnership, which is much deeper, of course, than what we had before. It's in a sense, mobility is an easy element of partnership to bring together. You bring people to establish labs, establish courses in the north. But I don't, you know, I think we need to look beyond that. I think we need to look at whether it's distributed campuses, joint campuses, whether as we're doing in Malawi, is joint labs, you know, joint medical and dental schools. These are the kind of things we need to look to really deepen those partnerships and ensure that we avoid this asymmetry that's existed in some north-south partnerships in the past.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for that, Anton. Completely agree. And of course, this is work that the University of Glasgow is progressing through our strategic relationship with the African Research Universities Alliance, and also through CIVIS, our European University Alliance, where we've now signed strategic partnerships to bring on 6 associate partners of CIVIS from Africa. And a lot of the conversations we are having are exactly of that nature. You know, how are we supporting capacity strengthening, and how can we get creative and imaginative, as Anton had mentioned in his remarks, about thinking through the opportunities of things like split site PhDs and satellite campuses and kind of new and innovative ways of engaging and collaborating. And so it's a very exciting space, I think, for us all to be in and to work through. One of the other areas kind of linked into mobility, and I wonder whether I can bring Jenny back in for this, is just around that balance between the kind of the in-country experience, but also access, and how do we ensure that students across our communities have the ability to have that international experience, when not every single member of our community will have the capability to travel. And I know that that's something that we are talking a lot about through Universitas 21. I just wondered, you know, how do we work through, what does internationalization at home mean? How do we make that kind of a meaningful and impactful experience for our student community?
Oh, I think it's a critical question, and what struck me listening to the conversation is that we've really got to be so nimble and agile as we go forward and think about new models. I think we've really got to not be captured by what we've done in the past, but really think anew. And I'm very mindful of the Ukraine problem about the potential loss of talent coming from Aotearoa New Zealand. That's always been an issue for us, but of course we've got people go out, people leave, and we've also got other people who come to us. So, but I think it's critical. And what we found in U21, of course, was that going online simply transformed the network and our relationship with our students, because those students who couldn't afford the traditional forms of mobility could now access internet colleagues in other parts of the globe virtually. And that's just opened up a whole new world, one where you can do micro internships, you can have global citizenship programs, short programs, bringing people together, setting up their own networks, really bringing home problems across the globe where they can see how you're working on SDGs, looking at particular solutions with people that you've never worked with before. So we can't lose that going forward. We must hold on to that, and particularly as people want to come back and re-engage and travel as we used to. So I think that's vitally important, but also to keep building on those opportunities, so that we are starting to think, picking up on some of that discussion around, for example, doctoral mobility and not to non-traditional destinations. We've really got to come to grips with some of those issues of kind of north-south and new ways that are really going to turn things on their head. So I think that's really very much a role for networks and their universities as we sort of look to kind of really deal with some pretty challenging issues going forward.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for that, Jenny. And actually, again, it's a nice segue into another question that we've had from our audience. And actually, this one is from Shona Mack. So Shona from our own international recruitment team at Glasgow. And actually, Shona's kind of building on exactly the point that you're making, Jenny, which is, we are reopening up to international travel, but online collaboration has allowed us to achieve a huge amount over the course of the last 2 years. And how do we ensure that we get the balance right going forward, particularly that this is not just about internationalization experience, it's also how can we reconcile globalization with the sustainability agenda, and there's been much discussion around that today as well. And Mychailo, you've already posted a response to Shona, so I might point to you first, if that's okay, just to kind of come in and comment.
Sure. I think it's I think we've had over the last 2 years perhaps a movement. I think we may have gone a little bit too far in the online movement, let's put it that way, because of the fact that because of COVID and because of current crises, etc. I think that's something that's very important to remember, that education is not just about knowledge transfer. It's not just about building competencies. I as a sociologist, I like to quote Bourdieu. Antoine, it's a little sort of I guess pass to you as the French representative. Bourdieu talks about education being something that has to do with cultural capital, that has to do with social capital, that has to do with building networks. These are things that we really, it's very difficult to do looking at a computer screen. And so I think we need to find balance. Now, how are we going to find balance? I'm not sure that there's there's a universal answer to that. But I think that Rachel, in our discussions, we've been talking about COIL quite a bit. And I think that this is something that is very important when we talk about teaching, that, yeah, we can do collaborative online interactive learning, which is going to be something that is synchronous. Perhaps we can add some asynchronous online learning, but we cannot forget about the fact that we are losing something in the process if we don't have a face-to-face connection. And so I think that the idea of, for example, 2-year masters that were mentioned today with mobility, the idea of split site PhDs, the idea of mobilities during bachelor's programs, I'm very concerned that we lose those things because of COVID, because of things that have happened over the last 2 years, and that we try to certainly maintain the balance between face-to-face and the benefits of technology. I think each of us needs to find that balance ourselves, but nevertheless, it's a challenge.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we say this a lot, but the future is likely to be hybrid, and it's about optimizing the best of both worlds, those kind of really rich in-country experiences versus what we can deliver really successfully and effectively and impactfully online. And apologies, because somebody else had also posted up a question on exactly this theme around, you know, how we do reconcile international and sustainable. And I think we can. I'm actually really optimistic about that. And within our own Global Glasgow strategy, we very specifically reference our sustainability strategy, Glasgow Green, and the fact that Global Glasgow and Glasgow Green have to work together. You know, they have to be mutually supportive of one another. And yes, there may be some challenges with that, but I think it's a challenge that we're all up for. I'm conscious that we are very quickly running out of time. So one of the last points that I might just bring in, and actually, Joanna and Jenny, a very obvious question for both of you, but others, please feel free to jump in, but it's really about the importance of networks. And so what role could networks, you know, like ACU, like Universitas 21, like the Guild, play in supporting kind of teaching and research around that politics of the earth agenda? You know, so what role can networks really play in supporting universities and thinking around kind of sustainable future international partnerships? Sorry, that's a very big question to land on, and I know we don't have very much time, so you can keep your responses fairly high level, and we probably don't have time to do too much digging on that. But Joanna, I might come to you first, and then Jenny.
Okay, it's a great question. Convening power. You know, we have among a network, it's fantastic how, for example, on our peace and reconciliation or our SDG network, we share best practice and knowledge. So meeting in Melbourne to talk about Indigenous languages, we had people from Kenya and Nigeria also talking about the importance of Indigenous languages. There's a question about that coming up, and different approaches to that. And then we produce policy from that. So convening power and sharing best practice, I think, is one of the first things. I think it's also supporting our members to learn from each other. And then I think it's also I think it's a network's responsibility to be able to make the case for higher education wherever one can, so that the funding mechanisms and instruments, both for funding research from national governments, but also for funding international collaborations, the multilateral types of partnerships, understand that higher education have to be part of the story. And I think that's what the ACU exists to do in some ways more than anything else. I'll hand over to Jenny.
Thanks, Joanna. Jenny, over to you.
Look, I agree with all of that about, you know, best practice, sharing learnings, helping members. But I in my opening remarks, I flagged the possibility of, you know, the potential of networks actually working together, because actually we are, and I've been very mindful of this morning, hearing the conversations, is that we are actually often engaged in very similar activities. And last year, Glasgow helped convene a meeting on COP26 of universities and other relevant organisations with the British government. And, you know, networks coming together to work together as networks does actually offer some possibility for actually achieving more powerful outcomes. Now, not easy to do, but I do think there is a moment that we've arrived at here, where if we really want to get to grips with some of the biggest challenges, that's what we should be thinking about doing.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jenny. Sadly, we are really now out of time, and actually maybe I will take the chair's prerogative by just ending that question by reflecting back on our own international strategy, which really does have at its very core the power of collaboration and teamwork. And I do think that the unprecedented events of the last 2 years have shown that as a university, we flourish when we work together. And now more than ever, it's vital that we remain global in outlook and collaborative in approach. And I very much hope that the session today has illustrated the positive impact of colleagues from across the sector coming together to share ideas and expertise. So firstly, my deepest thanks go to all of our panelists. Thank you so much, Anton, for your keynote, which has kicked off the beginning of our internationalisation events over the course of the next 2 days. Huge thanks to Jenny, Joanna, to Anton, and to Mychailo for your time and for your really insightful comments, which I think have given us a huge amount to go away and think about. I'm really grateful that you have found time in your very busy schedules to join us today. And thank you to all of our attendees for your time and for your wonderful questions and contributions. I hope that you found today's discussion as interesting as I have. I also hope that you'll be able to join us for the other sessions we have planned over the course of the next 48 hours. If you would like to watch this session again, I think I will. We will be sending out recordings of the sessions to all attendees after the conference. And the next session will be Think Global, Act Local, supporting and connecting with local communities as a global civic university, and it is due to start in just under 2 hours at 1 o'clock British Summer Time. So I hope that you'll be able to join us for what I'm sure will be a fantastic session with colleagues, which will actually feature panellists from the University of Glasgow, Glasgow City Council, the University of Tübingen, as well as Kamuzu University of Health Sciences in Malawi. But for now, huge thanks again to you all. Many thanks for taking the time to be with us here today. And yes, we look forward to connecting again over the course of the next 2 days of our conference. So thank you very much.
Thank you.